Welcome back. Today we're in Assetto Corsa to look at something that I'm so excited to talk about, something that I was hoping for a long time that something would come out or come my way that I could talk about, and that is a car we're looking at here, and more importantly, the driver who drove it. So this is the Tyrrell 002 from the 1971 and 72 F1 seasons, and driving it, if you couldn't tell by the name on the airbox and the side pod and the helmet, you can kind of see, this is Francois Cevert's car from that season. And this is in Assetto Corsa, like I said. This is a mod that I think some weird hack of a conversion of another conversion. I don't even know the legality of all of it, but it does its part all right. It's definitely not the best mod and not something I would usually want to really show off, but if you haven't noticed my thumbnail for my channel, Francois Cevert is somebody that I hold in very high regard and is one of, if not my most favorite F1 driver of all time. So I saw this and knew I had to do a video to let everybody know everything I know about Francois Cevert, and hopefully a few people hear something they haven't heard before. But this car, let's talk about the car real quick, and then we'll go for a spin here. We're at the Nordschleife, of course, the beautiful 1967 version. So this is the Tyrrell 002. So this was the car that Ken Tyrrell and the Tyrrell team built for the 1971 and 72 seasons. I think Jackie Stewart actually used a different chassis number, but I think that was actually to do with Francois Cevert's height. He wasn't a particularly tall guy, but Jackie Stewart was a particularly short guy, so I think they actually had different chassis numbers and everything for them. But like I said, Cevert raced this through the 71-72 season, had a different aero package. I think at the beginning of the 71 season, we're looking at, I think, how the more or less the car ended up that year, and raced for most of the 72 year. Like that, but very successful within this car, and very successful within a short career, many podiums, and most importantly, and really the reason why this car is famous, it's the one and only win. Francois Cevert got his one and only win in this car at the end of the 1971 season in the United States Grand Prix. For the very last race of that season. So for that reason, this car itself is very well regarded and known. It might be a little more famous, the similar version for Jackie itself. But taking a spin around the car, it's not modeled great here. It's modeled all right. I think this is a really old mod for F1 9902 F1 Challenge, but it does its part, and something that's really fun to drive and talk about. So I'm actually going to jump in the cockpit here, if we can, and we'll go around a lap. Now, I'm not going to be trying to do a hot lap as such here. I more or less want to talk about the car, but we'll try to get up to some decent pace down the front straightaway here at the old Nordschleife. It's a beautiful track in Assetto Corsa. I know I want to talk about the car, but I mean, just look at this. It's gorgeous, and then modeled really well as well. I think there's some scanning or map data going on here for sure. But the car, so like I said, built 71, 72. I'll talk a little bit here about Francois Cevert and his history. Francois has a really interesting past, I think. So back in the 60s and 70s, just make sure I break enough for this corner up here. Back in the 60s and 70s, F1 drivers did not just race in F1. They're kind of racing everywhere. Remember, I have some cold tires here. F1 drivers today really just stick to F1, and it's not till their career's over that they even do anything else. But F1 drivers, 60s and 70s, it was kind of expected that you were going to race everywhere. So not only were they racing F1 week in, week out, but they were also racing in F2 and sports cars, Can-Am, even IndyCar, whatever was available and fun. So in the late 60s, I think 69, Jackie Stewart, who was racing for Ken Tyrrell and Matra at the time, was doing an F2 race in France, I believe, and had this amazing battle with this new young French driver, one Francois Cevert. Now, Cevert, I think, had only been racing at all for a couple of years at that point. I think coming from a pretty high up background, but nothing nothing diminished on his talent. He quickly made his way up to the F3, F2 categories and found himself racing Jackie Stewart, who at that time was a very well-regarded driver, obviously. And so him and Jackie have this amazing battle the whole race. I think coming to the finish line, they're actually side by side, which was pretty rare in those days. A lot of finishes by minutes, not seconds or even tenths of a second, but side by side finish. And drove clean the whole race, drove beautifully. After the race, Jackie Stewart goes to Ken Tyrrell, his boss, and says, "We got to hire this guy." And so fast forward 1970 season, Francois Cevert has a ride with Tyrrell as the second driver to Jackie Stewart. Now this is the part I think is the most interesting about Francois Cevert specifically, and that's his relationship with Jackie Stewart and how he was brought into F1. He is the ultimate, Francois Cevert is the ultimate apprentice to Jackie Stewart. He is learning everything Jackie Stewart has to say, even following him around on the racetrack, following him around, during the races to learn the right way to race a Grand Prix car. And I think Jackie loved this relationship they had. Ken Tyrrell loved it. Jackie's essentially grooming, a driver. I feel like this isn't something that you've seen really hardly ever outside of this scenario, or at least I'm not aware of another situation where you really have these two drivers with a very friendly relationship. One seen as the master, being Jackie Stewart, one seen as the apprentice. And so have this wonderful relationship going in the 1970 season, and you can tell this by Francois Cevert's results. So Francois Cevert was no slouch at all. He only raced in 76 Grand Prix total, but out of those 76 Grand Prix, I think he ended up with something like 12, or let me actually look quickly at the statistic, 13 podium finishes out of the 46 Grand Prix. Oop, missing my gear there, as is my norm. So, 13 podiums, 46 Grand Prix, that's almost a quarter or so of the races that he ever ran. He got a podium from, and he ended up with that one win, like I said, for United States Grand Prix. So who was he finishing second to all those times? Well, the majority of the time it was Jackie Stewart himself. Francois Cevert was basically following him and learning how to race, and I think the Tyrrell cars at the time were just much superior in a lot of ways, but it doesn't diminish at all their talents, Jackie Stewart and Francois Cevert, but it's this really interesting relationship. There's a movie called Champions Forever, and I think it also goes by Fast and the Dead, and I believe you can find it on YouTube, and I recommend searching for this video. It's basically a documentary that follows Jackie Stewart and Francois Cevert around during the 1973 season, and it's so interesting. I think a lot of the vibe, I'm not from that time, and a lot of what I've learned about how F1 was conducted and how the drivers interacted with each other, I took from that movie, really. So I really recommend. It's extremely interesting. But anyways, Francois Cevert gets in the car, finishes second a bunch of times in 1971, ends up winning the final Grand Prix of the season at the United States Grand Prix, and then 72, a lot more of the same, a lot of second places, didn't win, unfortunately. Going to 73 then. So we're out of the range in this car a little bit. 73 though, Jackie Stewart announces his retirement. So this is the final season Jackie Stewart will be racing. Young guy, I think he was only something like 34, 35 at the time. Whoa, we buried the car into the carousel there. 34, 35 at the time, so he's going to retire, and Francois Cevert has this final season to take in everything he can learn from Jackie and be ready to take over the team starting in 74 for Ken Tyrrell. So they go through this season, and that's actually where the documentary follows, 1973, and it follows them through the whole season. And then I think the part maybe most folks would know about Francois, the end of the season, last race, United States Grand Prix, just 2 years after he had won the Grand Prix. In the documentary, you can see Jackie Stewart and Francois arguing with one another about how to take certain corners, and Francois goes out on the track driving around, and there's a massive accident, and he's dead on the spot. So this young guy, so much potential, just a silly mistake, and it just goes to show how dangerous Grand Prix racing was back in these days. You know, we're flying by fence posts and guardrails and things. It doesn't take much if you have a little mistake to go out and have an accident and ended up killing him. So, terribly tragic story. Led to a lot of stuff. I mean, Jackie talks about it quite a bit in that, it's one of the main things, along with a few other, very notable deaths, like obviously Jimmy Clark, Jochen Rindt, Pierce Courage. These are all drivers who died racing and led to there being this massive, uprising and saying, we have to make this safer. This is just silly. And I think a lot of times, folks really concentrate on Niki Lauda's accident as really that turning point, but I think Cevert has an equal, if not more, impactful message there at the time. And unfortunately, he's fading into history a little bit, but hopefully, talking about him here, folks maybe want to go read a little bit more or watch some video of the guy, because great driver, amazing personality, and I think one of those what if stories for sure. Getting a little loose there into the second carousel. So we're coming to the end of this lap. I think this car is geared completely incorrectly for the circuit, but nevertheless fun to drive. Car's not modeled well, as I said at the start of the video. You can see the front suspension doesn't even move on the car itself, but even a mod done to this standard I still am so attracted to, and I would really, really love to see that somebody do a full, really well done early 70s set of mods. I do have to try, there's a 75 mod I think out there, 75 and 76, so I gotta try those at some point to see what those are all about. But early 70s for some reason have just been ignored completely by sim racing. I think there's a few mods, and I think where this car originates from the F1 Challenge game, from the late 90s, early 2000s, and those definitely are not the best models and mods and everything that are out there. So we'll come across the line here. We can see if we can put together a decent lap. I've had a lap to warm up the tires then. I've not driven this car too much, and it definitely handles a little odd here and there. We're gonna run a little wide, jumping into the first corner. Car obviously has downforce, with the huge wings in the front and the back, but honestly does not feel like it has a ton. So much fun to rocket around the Nordschleife. I love this older version of it. I think new version's alright too, but so much more character on the circuit in this old version, as was true with all the tracks back then. Get it down into second gear here. Still not pushing completely, but I think I've got that in me today. Through fourth gear here. Love the hedges on the side of the circuit. I think they're still working on improving the circuit more, and I can't imagine what else they're going to do to it to make it even better than it is here. This next right-hander to head up towards Flugplatz. Up through the gears. I do not know how far this car will get off the ground. Oh, give it a little air. Nice plop on the ground there at the top of the hill. Fifth gear, car geared a little too short. I need to lengthen the gears, quite a bit to not max out around here, especially down the long straightaway at the end of the lap. You can see, or at least I can see, why motor racing was so addicting in this time. Just an H pattern, a lot of horsepower, and a country road. Doesn't get much better than that. of the hill, down into fourth. Just to be careful not to nip the grass in any of these corners. Spin you out pretty easily. I say that as I almost do the thing I'm saying not to do. Hold it in nice and close. You know, the sounds, I don't know how accurate they are, but they're not half bad. At least give you the sense of a lot of power with the car. Down the hill, it's an easy place to run wide and launch yourself off the top of the hill. Not saying that from experience or anything. Through hit, miss, and I just about miss. Get it down into second gear though. Probably should hit first there. Just run a little bit wide. Definitely something we'll have to try with some AI as we spin out at the top of the hill. We'll spin it back around. So, not making any records today, but a good amount of fun in this car. So I'm probably going to leave it there for this video, but I hope everybody learned something about Francois and more importantly, just the legacy he has. Or should have, really, being who he was. Let's get the camera in the bushes here, but we'll try to spin it around to get to the back of the car again. I hope more stuff like this comes out for Assetto Corsa or Grand Prix Legends. I know there's talk of a 70 mod, but would love to see that sim go into the 70s, especially the early 70s here. But let me know if you have any thoughts on Cevert or anything I'm missing out in the sim racing world that covers his career or this time period. Would love to see more of that, but I'll talk to you again soon.